if it's flogged off. Now, I think, therefore, there are very strong arguments to say that the financial case does not stack up. But even if it did stack up, I think most people in London, and we know that from surveys that have been done, would prefer not to see 12% of the fire brigade disappear in this way. We've heard about attendance times tonight from the Commission and the targets of 6 to 8 minutes. And it is a laudable aim across London to try and provide an equivalent service as far as impracticable across the capital. But what do we mean by attendance times in the context of this? Attendance times isn't the time when you pick up the phone and call 999. Attendance time starts when the call is received at the fire station concerned. And it ends when the commander of the first fire engine to get there says, or the second fire engine, depending which, says we've arrived at the incident. It does not include the time for when they actually start to fight the fire. Now, at the moment, if all the houses in London were the same, and all the low-rise street properties like you're getting out of London, like you're getting in James's constituency, then it wouldn't be a big problem, because when the fire engine arrives, as an ordinary house, you can get to work pretty well straight away. But in central London, where these cuts bite the hardest, we have the most tall buildings. And the attendance time is no reflection of the time it starts to actually fight a fire in the tall buildings. And some of you may have seen the coverage in the news over the last few months of the big fire, inquiring for the big fire at Clerkenwell House south of the river. It was a quarter of an hour before the firefighting operation started, after the first fire engine put to attendance. And if we're serious about equalising across London, then in my view, this starts from the wrong premise. It's not attendance times we should be looking at, it's the times the firefighting operation actually starts. What we should be measuring is the time the person picks up the phone and gets through to the exchange, the control centre at 999, to the time the water starts squirting on the fire. That's the fair way of equalising across London fire brigade performance. This is not fair. It discriminates against areas with tall buildings like Islington, like Camden, like Westminster, all those other places. And if you saw that map, you'll have seen how the central London fire service is having their heart taken out of it by these cuts. And of course we have to look across London as a whole. It's not just a question of attendance times in that context, because seconds make a difference. A domestic fire can quadruple in intensity in 2 minutes. It's called the fire exponential curve. James was tweeting, I think, the other day from the authority meeting about what the authority of this was. Well, there's plenty of information from the Fire Research Station which backs up that research. It is a significant problem to do that. And now, if these fire stations go because we have fewer fires, yes, we do have fewer fires, and that's a compliment to the fire brigade that's achieved that. It's a bit like saying we have fewer crimes, therefore get rid of the police service. It doesn't follow. The fire brigade is instrumental in continuing to drive down those numbers of fires. And cutting the fire stations, cutting the firefighters, cutting the fire engines will continue to stop that happening. And what's really important, I think, in that context is to recognise that, OK, there may be fewer fires, but if it's your fire and the fire engine's got to come from further away, it's going to take longer to get there. It's not rocket science to work that out. So what does this mean for Islington? Well, on average, bearing in mind we're talking about attendance times, not the time that firefighting operations start, the first fire engine will take 25 seconds to get there. Shall we measure what 25 seconds is? Whilst your house is on fire, whilst you may have somebody trapped inside the fire, you're waiting. And you're waiting. And you're still waiting. This is how much longer you're going to be waiting. Not yet. Not yet. That's 25 seconds for the first fire engine extra to turn up. And you could double that for the second fire engine. And if you're in a tall block, how much longer is that going to take? These cuts are potentially going to cost lives. And of course that's just the average across Islington. If you look in Clerkenwell, it's going to be more than 2 minutes before the fire engine turns up. Overall, Islington has 5 wards and the 100 most deprived wards in London, and the average increase for those 5 is 22 seconds. And as we've said, it's not just Clerkenwell fire station closing. The reason I'm partly here is Clerkenwell attends more fires in Camden than it does actually in Islington. But what's important is to recognise is Kingsland in the last 6 months attended 197 fires in Islington, and Kingsland is going to close. In Camden, Clerkenwell attended 546, in the City of London 69, and Westminster 58. Clerkenwell is going to close. These are serious cuts that impact across London. And of course, we do have to look at the effect across London. 4.8 million Londoners will see a deterioration in their attendance times. At the first of these meetings I attended, the Commissioner talked about the London riots. We were under the riots. 98 of London's fire engines were committed to operations as a result of those riots. That's the figure the Fire Commissioner gave at that meeting. That left, at that time, 71 fire engines to provide a cry cover for everything else across London. All the other fires, all the road accidents, all the other rescues that had to be done. But of course, if we had riots on the same scale again, after these cuts, there'd only be 53 left across the whole of London. That's about 1.5 per London borough. And we have to remember, of course, that because it's attacking central London mainly, the most deprived parts of London will be those that are worst hit. 76 of the 100 most deprived wards in London will see an increase in attendance times. And we know deprivation is one of the key indicators of fire risk, because people live more densely, they have less likely to have smoke detectors, and they're at greater fire risk. And of course, it's not just poor people who require the fire service. In January, there was a fire in Bayswater, a Russian oligarch's house that he was building for his son. An enormous building. It was actually a block of flats that was turning back into a single building. Now, if you're rich, you can buy private health insurance. If you're rich, you can buy private security guards. But if you're rich, you can't buy your own fire brigade. And 12 fire engines were required to attend that fire in Bayswater. And 3 of those will be disappearing under these cuts. And lives will be at stake. In the current year, last year, 2011-12, there were 44 deaths from fire across London. 44 too many, but that's how many there were. The target performance, obviously we want to be below target for this one, the target performance for 13-14 is 56. So there are serious projections there. And we can see the impact of this from a fire that took place on the 15th of March in south of the river. 2 fire engines were sent to a person's reported fire where somebody was trapped inside the incident. One was from Plumstead and one was from Woolwich. Plumstead should have got there first, but got stuck in traffic and took a wrong turn. Human error does sometimes happen. They arrived after 12 minutes. By that time, if the one from Woolwich, which got there after 7 minutes, hadn't been there, that person would almost certainly have died. Because Woolwich got there after 7 minutes, they were able to rescue that person, bring them out, give them first aid, and get them to hospital. Woolwich Fire Station is one of those slated for closure. And there are many, many examples of that. I can give many examples from Camden, where there was a fire just around the corner from Belsize Fire Station in a school. It happened to be half term in February. Belsize were there in less than 2 minutes. The next fire engine took 8 minutes. The roof was badly damaged. The whole school would probably have gone up if they hadn't got there. And it's not just me from the Labour Party or Terry from the Liberal Democrats who say this. The Conservatives across London aren't united on this either. That hotbed of revolutionary zeal, Westminster City Council's come out in opposition to these cuts, as has Kensington and Chelsea. These are serious cuts. We should not be making them for the very small amount that is being saved. The Mayor wants to force them through this year. He's fiddling like Nero in his Golden Palace, fiddling while Rome burns, as Boris is up in his 8th floor penthouse, looking out over London like Nero. But this isn't going to be the end of it. If these cuts are made, you can be absolutely sure that Boris will be back for another round, particularly with George Osborne about to implement more cuts from central government. At least another £9 million, that's another potentially half a dozen fire stations. So what can you do about this? Well, you can give these guys some difficult questions, I hope, based on what I've said. We've circulated some information sheets as well. If you haven't got them, hopefully, if you came in late, we can give you them later on. But it's important that you respond to the consultation online, sign the petitions, spread the message, come to the protest march a week on Saturday from Hanbury Corner, I think it is. Hanbury Fields, rather. It is important that every Londoner makes it clear to Boris Johnson and James Cleverly and the London Fire Brigade these cuts are simply not acceptable.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Islington. I'm Secretary Stacey. I am the Liberal Democrat group leader on the Fire Authority, and I'm also leader of the Liberal Democrat group here in Islington. I'm just going to say a few things to follow up Andrew's very articulate case of why these closure plans are wrong for London, and why particular closure plans for Islington fire stations here, i.e. the last Clerkenwell, are wrong for Islington. Next, I think a week on Saturday, there will be a march on my own ward here in Islington, which Islington filters in, to Clerkenwell. And nearly every single ward here in Islington will basically suffer as a result of the planned reductions, i.e. cuts in service. We will see a reduction across the board in every single ward of this borough in regards to response time. And some of those wards, I think, the reduction is quite shocking. In Clerkenwell, for example, we will see a reduction by 3 minutes plus in response times for the first and second attendants added together. In Mildmay Caledonian wards, we will see 6 minutes reduction in target time across both the first and second appliances. And in Barnesbury, we will see an 8-minute reduction. Now, Islington has got the highest number of tower blocks, high-rise residential dwellings of any in the London borough. And if these cuts had been pushed through earlier, what would have been the response of the fire brigade to 2010 Gambia House fire, which is a multi-storey tower block in Bunhill, and what would have been the response most recently to the Clerkenwell House fire that happened down the road from here? And why is the fire service facing this reduction? Well, we're facing this reduction in service as a result of the Conservative mayor who, despite being on his home turf in this within walking distance of this building, as Angela said, has refused to face neither workers of the service nor residents who will be affected by these cuts. And what is it going to basically deliver? Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to deliver a 7p a week saving in your council tax. That's 7p a week. Yeah. Now, when it all adds up, how much does it come to? It's pittance. Yeah. It's pittance. Yeah. And London can afford it if it wants a first-class fire service, which we have now. I think one of the things that the Commissioner has been very modest for this evening is that him and his colleagues have had to do the best of a bad deal. Yeah? The Mayor has made it very, very clear where he wants to save this from. He has been quite clear what he expects the fire service to deliver, and the Commissioner and his senior staff are putting together the best deal in their view to keep Londoners safe at the same time as deliver on the Mayor's cuts package. I'm quite clear where the blame for this reduction in cutting service